Now, we've been talking about data protection, data laws in this country. Recently, we saw the whole matter of an attack on our eCitizen platform, and everybody was concerned. Oh my goodness, eCitizen knows me. My ID number, they have my password to eCitizen. You go into eCitizen, you can find all the pre-owned motor vehicles under my name. You go to
under the owners.
Surely, is that data safe? The Ministry of ICT said, well, the attack did not get into the data bit, but people are like, few days later, crowd, KICC, they are lining up to look into an orb. Look into an orb, get paid.
The looking wasn't the key thing. The looking was an avenue. It was a path.
It was the money.
It was a path to an amount of money that many people found useful. That crowd.
It was a means to an end.
Yes, the proof of that concept. That amount was useful.
It was the money.
Yes.
Yeah. I've seen memes now going around saying, what is it called? WorldCoin. Ile 7,000 imeisha. Kujeni mutumulike mapua.
We have other things to show you.
We even have a forehead. We have teeth. Yes.
Ile ya macho imeisha.
Ile mlitoa ya macho.
What is it that was happening in the country? The questions now start emerging on how well our data protection laws are actually protecting our data. And we are now joined by an expert in this matter. Amit Gadhia is a lawyer and advocate of the High Court and is an expert on data protection laws. And he's joining us to have this conversation. Amit, good morning.
Morning.
Thank you very much for joining us. That is the hot seat of the Situation Room.
Thank you.
What would you like us to mulika? We have some money to give.
We can start with my eyes. And for record purposes, I never gave my irises.
You didn't?
So they are still available.
They're still available.
They're still full.
They're free. Nothing has been taken.
We can start somewhere.
Yes.
All right. To welcome you to the conversation,
Thank
City
you.
Muga has the day's proverb.
Our proverbs for the whole of this week are from the country of Burkina Faso. Even if you do not like the hair, recognize its speed.
Even if you do not like the hair, recognize its speed.
Watcha.
It's not gonna let.
Look at Amit. It's not hair.
Not hair,
Bro,
not that hair.
it's no. Hey. It's that cousin of the rabbit. Yes, that's the one.
Okay.
Yes.
Even if you do not like Kakasungura,
Yes.
recognize its speed.
Yes.
What do you think the proverb is saying?
I think if I make the analogy with technology, if technology has been moving at a slow speed, if we think about where artificial intelligence is taking us, the word artificial intelligence was hardly coined a few years back, right? Yet in this day and age, every day you do not open the newspaper without hearing the word AI. So in that sense, AI has been a hair. But now it is moving exponentially.
So moving too fast.
And in that, the data protection laws and broader laws globally, which are associated with AI, are not able to keep up. And every day we are all looking at how to regulate AI. In fact, globally, there are no AI regulations as we speak yet. So, yeah.
Very good perspective. Thank you very much for that. There are people nowadays who are calling themselves data experts on various fronts. Data protection expert, data, I don't know what, expert. You are a data expert as well when it comes to law. Did you study data protection at university or the Kenya School of Law?
Data protection is a very new space globally. If anybody tells you they've studied data protection at university, I don't think that'd be correct to say. Data protection in Kenya specifically has been around since November 2019 when we got our Data Protection Act, and even before that in Article 31 of the Constitution of Kenya since 2010. So the right to privacy is enshrined in our constitution. However, studying data protection is a more broader subject. It's more about reading articles, what's happening globally, what's happening within Kenya, what's happening wider within Africa. And I'm proud to say that Africa is the continent with the highest amount of data protection laws. Out of the 52 plus countries, already we have 40 plus which have data protection laws. So to answer your question straight, yes, it is more about getting certifications, learning on the job, learning from the experts, senior in the developed countries and within Africa.
Like you said, this sphere is actually moving very fast.
Correct.
Now we have laws. The law that we have in this country was enacted in what year?
2019?
2019.
Correct.
A lot has happened since 2019.
Absolutely.
Is our law.
And the regulations came into force in July 2022.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even looking at 2022 July, which is a year and 2 months down the road, are we at par with the developments in this space?
Again, it depends what you mean by at par. If the ODPC's office is just over a year old, and they have moved substantially fast by looking at the registration of data controllers and processors. I mean, to use the term more simply, it's about organizations who process personal data. I mean, without going into who are data controllers and processors. They have issued numerous guidelines. They've issued numerous penalties. I mean, some of the largest penalties which have been issued in East Africa has been by ODPC. For example, if you look at the cases of the digital lenders a few months back, 40 digital lenders were declined licenses by the Central Bank of Kenya because they were not compliant with the data protection laws. Some telecommunication companies have been fined, right? So I think in that respect, there has been a lot which has been going on. So it's important to remember that the ODPC's office, though it is quite young, insofar as I'm concerned, I think they have already a number of offices regionally, not countrywide. Yeah.
It's interesting because this space, this sphere that then is being operated within when it comes to data protection and its policies is an ever-changing one.
Correct.
With medicine, for example, there's some basic things, right, that will never change, doesn't matter.
No.
That the rules of infection, for example, are going to be the same. That
Yes.
if you do something in a certain way, you could get infected, you will get sick. This is the treatment. This is what would happen. What would be different was that maybe there would be technologies that could treat you faster or cure you. That maybe in the few years you would have a cure.
Correct.
But the basic thing you know about medicine remains the basic thing.
Yes.
In this space, it's changing every day.
Correct.
There are new technologies. The very basic function of this data and the way we see it. You mentioned AI, very few years old. Something new may come up tomorrow. Can you really have an expert on something that changes literally on the day?
It's for data protection, it is difficult to have somebody who can call themselves 100% expert. But like in any other subject, for example, the laws are, when it comes to technology, some of the other laws within Kenya and globally, they changed almost on daily basis. So what you need to do is need to keep up with the relevant sector of laws. So for example, others are much more developed, like employment laws, company laws, accounting laws, medicine, right? Those are fairly developed for a number of decades, if not centuries. Data protection is a very new space. And for data protection laws to be expecting data protection laws, AI regulations to upkeep with those which have been set up decades back, I think that would be unrealistic.
Sure.
Yeah.
When we think about data protection as well, we often think of it in a negative light. I'll explain.
Correct.
Because we often think something simply bad will happen. And so when you think data protection, you think, oh my gosh, when we heard this thing the other day, the first thing was, all right, first, all of your information is going to go. It's going to be in the hands of somebody else who manipulate it or do whatever else they would want to do with it, right?
Correct.
So it's in a negative light that we often view it. Do you how then do you deal, or what would then be the advice? As you say, here are, banks of sensitive information that are privy or that are at risk of then being attacked by anybody who's, into any kind of nefarious activity.
Yeah.
What would be your basic advice that you would say, these are things you must have, or these are things that you should not do to make sure, because it's going to be WorldCoin today coming in talking to people, it's going to be somebody else tomorrow, it's going to be sell this, it's going to be one Ponzi scheme tomorrow doing something else. Do you think that laws should become almost prohibitive when it comes to certain things?
One thing is, when it comes to data protection laws, you spoke about banks, you spoke about organizations, that is going to be a bad thing. Instead of portraying data protection in a negative way, it is important to portray it in what positive impact it can have within an organization and to an individual. What is important is, most organizations, especially those who have shareholders, they have to have a return, a value to their shareholders.
Yep.
So in mature jurisdictions like the US and Europe, there have been studies which have been going on for the last 5-6 years since the General Data Protection Regulation came in US. There's actually a report by Cisco that those who are early implementers of data protection, they have actually got value on their investment twice the value in dollar terms in the investment. So in terms of...
How is that assessed?
Well, there is a report where they assessed more than 2,700 or 2,500 old organizations where they implemented. They've got certain matrix. Don't ask me about matrix. I'm bad with statistics. But I can send you the report. It is online. It's by Cisco. They have a report every year. In 2022, they had a report also in 2021. So that means those organizations who are seeing the value, the real value, is that they have started to implement, and then the value in data privacy, the investment in data privacy is increasing. What is important is for an individual, myself, yourself, we all have data subject rights.
Yeah.
Or as a local citizen, local resident, you need to ask anywhere who is asking for data, whether that is a bank, telecommunication company, or a newspaper. Ask them, how are you processing my personal data? You want my phone number, no problem. Show me where your privacy notice is. Show me who you are sharing my data with. What is your lawful basis? You want my iris, no worries. I'll give you my iris. But then are you following the law? Right? Are you explaining to me in the language I understand that you are going to use my iris, which is my currency, right? Which is my personal data in the way I feel is reasonably right. And those are very simple things you need to understand, and then you can give it to them. That is not an issue. If not, then they are not doing their job properly.
Can you ask the same of the government?
Yes, you can. Right? Under the data protection law, unless there are certain exemptions, right? But those are very few. Even the government needs to comply with the Data Protection Act. When it comes to for example, in some of the mature jurisdictions, in the UK, the political parties have been fined for data breaches, right? In some of the European countries, the city councils have been fined for data protection breaches. So the government is not exempt.
Because you see, the government collects a lot of our data from very many points. Now let's just look at eCitizen, for instance. So you go into eCitizen, you go into any of the services that's being offered, go to NTSA, you're applying for a driving license, to renew a driving license. You're giving them all the information that they require. In fact, they tell you, come for a smart DL. Okay. So visit our office so we can then gather your biometric data. You give them your biometric data. Immigration department asks for the same biometric data. You give them a biometric data. They are correlating all this, and they're able to tell that you are the one who's logged on to eCitizen. At what point am I able to ask how much of my information I'm giving to one department of government and what that department of government is doing with that data, and whether it can share with any other department of government and for what purpose.
Let's flip that question.
Let's flip it.
The question and the answer to your question is, at what point are they obliged by law to inform me of my rights and who they're sharing it with?
Okay.
And the answer to that is at the point of collection. So the moment you log into any website, whether it's government, private, charity, education, at the point they're collecting, or you walk into a supermarket, they are meant to tell you what data they're collecting from you, what are your data subject rights, who they are sharing the data with, how long they're going to keep your data, what are the principles of data protection, how they're adhering to it, and if they're transferring data abroad. That has to be set out in a simple, concise manner in a privacy notice, and that has to be brought to the attention of the individual.
Amit, do such exist? Let's go to the Department of Immigration. You're applying for a passport. They are gathering all this information from you. So you seek an appointment through eCitizen. They give you the appointment, and then you go into their office at Nyaya House, you queue, you give them all these things. At what point are they giving you that consent form to tick the box?
Well, I applied for my passport a long time back, so I don't know whether it exists at the moment. But ideally, say that from the example you have given me, right? I've not checked the practices they have. So the moment you walk into, say, a government department, there has to be a notice, right? For example, even a CCTV footage. So we say, for example, I spent the last 4 or 5 weeks photographing CCTV notices, and I'm told by my family I'm a bit weird because I look.
This premise is under CCTV surveillance, 24-hour CCTV
right.
surveillance.
So you notice that whenever we walk into some of the organizations, they say it is under CCTV surveillance, right?
Yeah.
What are they doing? They are giving you a notice that you are under CCTV surveillance. And then what they're also meant to do, they're meant to tell you how they are processing that data. So they're meant to have either CCTV policy or their privacy notice, what is on there, okay? When they start processing your biometrics, now biometric data, you mentioned biometric data, fingerprints, voice recognition, hair is also biometric data.
Touche.
They must have, those are known as sensitive personal data. Right? So, for example, your race, gender, your social, ethnic origin, your property details, your financial details are your sensitive personal data.
Yeah.
Now, that is a subset of personal data which requires a much more higher category of protection, right? And especially when you talk about biometrics, it is very important to get the right informed consent from the individual. Yeah.
So these guys come into the country, and they somehow are able to mobilize people to come to KICC, and they collect all this kind of biometric info that they got. The Office of the Data Protection Commissioner says they came, they applied for our consent, we give them some consent. Are there some loopholes that they were able to exploit that you can say, as far as the law is concerned, in many instances, the law is being followed.
Yeah.
But then there are some areas that maybe the law is grey,
Correct.
which would now allow for more of this information to be collected without more scrutiny.
But
yes, CT?
I'm asking, consent. What consent were they applying for?
Those are the things.
You see, without going into the intricacies of what may or may not have transpired between the ODPC and the WorldCoin, right? There is a broader misconception in Kenya that once you're registered as a data controller, as a data processor, organizations, first of all, let's take a step back. Any organization, provided it meets certain thresholds of employee number of employees or number of your turnover, annual turnover, you need to register with the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, right? Failing which, this is under Section 19 of the Data Protection Act. I think it's Section 19. If you're not registered, it is you must register to process personal data. There are also mandatory sectors which need to register, right? So what may have been happening, they might have said that we have registered with the Data Commissioner's Office. Now here's a registration certificate. This gives us a license. Now, as I said, I stand to be corrected. So they may have used a registration certificate. But that is a registration with the ODPC's office is a very minor compliance. The rest is all about demonstrating continuously with your policies, procedures, contracts, data protection impact assessments, how you are complying.
I still don't understand. What's the certificate for? I mean, you're collecting data. So what are you collecting the data for? What is your function? What is your job? What business are you in?
Correct.
Yes.
So if I may just go back one bit, like when you talk about the certificate of registration,
Yes.
and you're saying you're then compliant, is like saying that you have got a KRA PIN, and now you're compliant with your tax obligations. Is that correct? No, it's not correct. A KRA PIN number is simply to show that you have started your compliance.
Yes.
That is, and if I may use that analogy to use with the same with the data controller, data processor, right? When you register with the ODPC's office.
That's it.
That's it, and there is more to it. There is far more to it than just registration.
That's the knock on the door.
You need more licensing or more applications.
Well, I would not say more applications. I would say you need. I'm not talking about Vulcan, but generally speaking, you need to demonstrate compliance. So how, basically, we talked about the privacy notice.
Yeah.
How are you? You're using the personal data. Who are you sharing it with? What is your lawful basis? For example, there are 8 lawful bases under the Data Protection Act. Some of them are a bit overlapping, but then if you do not have a lawful basis for processing, and consent is one of them, we'll talk about consent. If you do not have the lawful basis for processing personal data, you cannot process personal data. It's as simple as that. So anybody processing personal data must have a lawful basis for processing. So that is one step. The second step is how have you done a data protection impact assessment, especially for biometric data. So biometric data, you must submit a data protection impact assessment to the ODPC's office at least 60 days before you start processing.
Before you start processing
the personal data.
Okay.
Right? Also, there is the issue of now, we've talked about, we are now focusing on the ODPC's office, but let's look at the broader picture. Is the ODPC's office the only person who gives green light for collection of personal data? If you're an organization, what do you need to do? You need to register, whether you're a foreign company or you're a local company. The bigger question is, why they registered with the company's registry?
Okay.
Has anybody explored that angle? Yes.
So in the event that you're collecting information from anybody on whatever, you need to be an entity, number one.
A legal entity.
And you need to register on that fact alone, that you will be collecting information from individuals. You must register with the ODPC's office.
Correct.
Okay.
But before that, you need to be an entity.
Yeah.
So you need to go to the BRS
in the first place.
And register
that is a question.
As an entity. Right? So then you become a corporate citizen. And
if we talk about digital wallets, getting registration certificates. What is a digital wallet? Right? It's like a bank account, right?
Right.
Who regulates
it? Well, who is it? Is it the CBK?
Yeah. Have they been asked the question? Were they authorized? Did they authorize
to operate a digital wallet?
To operate the digital wallet?
Loopholes that exist. That's what we're talking about. Yeah. You're saying there are very many areas, even if we still have an office of the Data Protection Commissioner, this office must work with other agencies of government. So then we can ensure that all the information that's collected is safeguarded. It's processed in accordance with the law. But that's very many things to do, Amit. So is it the law that should say this? Is it the regulations that should say this? Do the regulations say this?
Well, I mean, it's a good question. In terms of regulations, yes, we are fairly heavily regulated. But then at the same time, if you think about it, if the regulations were not there, how are some of these organizations who come and take data, some of which is very intrusive, how are they meant to be brought to account? So how are you meant to look for accountability, transparency of who is processing your personal data and data generally speaking, right?
Yeah.
And yes, I mean, the paperwork is extensive. Sometimes applying for some of these laws and regulations is heavy. But then let's not forget Kenya is the leading tech hub in sub-Saharan Africa. And tech is the fastest moving sector at the moment globally as well as in Kenya. So laws regulating artificial intelligence, data protection, cybersecurity have to be much more highly regulated, in my opinion. Yeah.
Is it enough?
Depends. The technology, how the fast the technology is going to be moving in future. At the moment, the rules and regulations are there, but then again, how you interpret the rules, and that is how the regulations, the misconceptions arise. So let me give you an example of how the misconceptions arise. For example, everybody talks about consent, that I'm taking your consent to process your personal data.
Yes.
Okay? And even when I look at some of these privacy notices, when you talk about, they talk about consent of taking biometric data, consent is usually not taken in a very accurate manner. The law has a very high bar on how you seek a data subject or an individual's consent. So first of all, it has to be in the manner they understand. It has to be given freely, voluntarily. It has to be given in a manner which they can easily withdraw. So now let's talk about if somebody
must also understand the harms and the possibilities
Correct.
of ills that can
Correct.
arise from this.
in the simple language they understand.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that also applies to the Mama Mboga, who is
Everyone, yes.
everyone,
Yes.
because she is also a data subject. She has rights to data protection. And if you are going to be inducing someone with monetary amounts and saying, you give us your most sensitive personal
That's
data,
actually coercion.
right? Is that voluntary or is that coercion?
It's coercion.
Especially at the moment we are going through a huge crisis of a cost of living crisis, right? Where the amounts which are being paid is equivalent to your monthly salary. What will you do? Is that valid consent? That is my question. No, it isn't. Let's take another simple example of consent in an employer and an employee situation.
Right.
Right. When somebody says that for recruitment we need all your data, are you really? And the employee needs a job, right? Who is in a higher bargaining position, the employer or the employee?
Well, the power is shifting to the employer.
Yeah. So that is how you need to look at consent. Right? A consent has to be the first principle of data protection. It has to be lawful, fair, and transparent. You will not find a single data protection law globally where this is not the principle of data protection. It's as simple as that. So it has to be fair.
Sure, it has to be fair. My issue here is that nobody's sharing this information. Who's tasked with the responsibility of making sure that everybody knows this? Who bells the cat here? Because if somebody says share your information, you're the audacious one who's looking for a job. At that point, you're not really thinking, well, you know what? These people have a responsibility to protect me because with the data that I've given to them, right? It's not public awareness. Nobody is putting it on billboards out there saying that you must be extremely careful. We fault folks who went and lined up at KICC the other day and gave their iris. Yeah, okay, but how many of those individuals, truth be told, had prior knowledge and information that, you know what, you could be getting 7,000 shillings, but there is a danger here. How much of that information is made public? It isn't. Yes, there's an office, there's a commissioner, there is an office that has been established, but in terms of information sharing, there is close to nothing. Who's protecting the people who are giving the information?
You know that they're part of what they ought to have done. Someone cannot gather your data and not tell you what they're going to do with it.
But they have. But cannot? Yes, they can. They've done it.
No.
They should not.
That they have doesn't mean ability. Yes, they're not supposed to.
And that's why it starts with you, who is giving your information.
Yes.
If you're aware, then there is bigger safeguard has already been taken care of.
Yes.
Because then you'll ask those questions. You'll say, no, before I give you my data,
what are you doing with it?
What are you doing with it? What are you supposed to do with it? How are you going to process this data? What how can I withdraw from this process at any point, at any stage?
Not just withdraw. When you withdraw, how certain will
How
I
do I
be that
come out
my
with my
data,
data?
is no longer available to you?
withdrawn.
Because it's not me moving physically. It's my data not being available to you for you
further
to use.
action.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that the job of the ODPC?
The ODPC has various functions, and one of them is of course bringing awareness. Given the time, the ODPC's office needs to create more awareness. As you know, it's a very young office with limited resources. At the same time, the number of offices, they have been holding awareness sessions throughout the country. However, data protection awareness is not only a Kenya issue. It's not an East African or an African issue. It's a global issue. If you go to some of these Western countries, right, a lot of the organizations, like I travel extensively in some of these countries, and even the practices I see there sometimes are below par as to what data protection laws are in those countries. So it's more about creating awareness at a local level, regional level, and a global level. How long it will take, it's another matter altogether. But I think it's all a matter of taking responsibility as an individual, as a corporation, though it may be even the ODPC is the driving force, but behind that we have the corporations as well. Right, as I alluded to earlier, that corporations will see value in this if they invest in privacy and data protection, which then it will seep down and filter down not only to their customers, suppliers, employees.
I mean, okay, let's delve into those waters a little bit, because we're all here talking about it's dangerous. Okay, fine. How dangerous is it? What could actually happen if somebody had your information? What could they do with it?
Somebody had your iris.
Yeah. What could really? What could they do with it? Because we're here. Okay, it sounds really ominous, and we're like, oh, okay, somebody could have my information.
The number
and walk
of
around.
the beast.
Yeah, exactly. But okay, what could they do with it if they actually had it? If they had your ID, they had your date of birth, they had all of that, what could actually be done with your info?
There is a lot that can be done. And without going into the many examples, so for example, all of us have a bank account, right?
Yeah.
All you need is to call your bank and ask them that I need to transfer these funds from my account to, say, your account, okay? What are the security questions they're going to ask me?
When are you going to ask the bank to do that?
You're interested in a little bit. Especially when it's from his account to yours.
That's what I meant to say. Please go on.
So they say, okay, my name is Amit Gadhia. This is my ID number. This is my email address. This is my this is my account number. What are they going to do? They've been trained that these are the security questions you need to ask.
Yes.
Straight away, there'll be a transfer.
Yeah.
Okay, of your personal data.
Yeah.
If there is a cyber breach and they get the data of all the individuals, more than 10,000 individuals, can you imagine the scale of that breach? Now here, you can probably change your email address.
Yeah.
You can change your phone number.
Yep.
Can you change your iris? Can you change your fingerprint? Can you change your voice? You cannot, right? So you can imagine in the future, with this age of artificial intelligence, how long is it going to take for such issues to happen?
In fact,
And when I read some of these privacy notices of especially who process biometric data, they say that it may your data is safe, but it may not be possible for us to replicate your biometric data. It may not be possible. They are not guaranteeing you that.
Yeah.
So who is the risk now, to answer your question? Right? It is a huge risk. I mean, to use this cliche which comes again and again, data is your currency.
Yeah.
Data is the new oil, right? It often comes, right? But it's just we don't appreciate as individuals that this is my ownership. My data is my ownership. It is my currency. It is more valuable than the money in my pocket.
In fact, what you're saying is best exemplified with something that I've read about, something called a SIM swap.
Yeah.
Where
Well, we suffered that in this country.
Yes.
Right?
where there are applications where people can actually do that. And given that we walk around with these gadgets, and literally our entire life is actually in here. Details, everything that we think about.
They do swim swap and they take over.
they take over, and once they take over your SIM, God alone knows what else they'll be able to do with it.
Yeah.
And especially the vulnerable people
Yes.
are more exposed. Children, old people, right? Disabled people. They are much more exposed. And this is how the hacking really starts. I mean, some of the sophisticated hackers who, I get calls regularly from some of these guys saying, your account has been hacked. We need to get your phone number. We need to get your email address. I'm like, yeah, try again. But then, because I know these laws, I eat and drink.
You are
data
in this
protection.
space, yes.
But then can you imagine my mom, my uncles,
immediately
right,
give her
who
email
are over
address.
70, they'll immediately give it.
They'll give. You touched on a story of you going around buildings and photographing CCTV cameras and CCTV notices.
Yes.
What was that all about?
Well, I just like to see how organizations from malls to supermarkets to banks, how they are doing data protection. Because the moment they take CCTV footages, like some of the CCTV cameras are so intrusive. They not only record your facial recognition, they not only recognize your movements, but they record your voice. They are so sophisticated, some of them can recognize you even a mile away, what you're talking about. In fact, in some of these countries, and I don't want to name names, that if you are captured in some of the CCTV footages, they can actually see if you are politically subversive. And the next moment you get arrested, the moment you're talking. They're that intrusive.
Wow.
What?
So yes. Yes.
Not in Kenya yet.
No, not in Kenya.
They
At least not
very
at the
many
moment.
people.
But then you can Google, you'll see what some of the countries I'm talking about. So you have to be very careful when it comes to CCTVs, right? So that is one of the reasons why I say, those clients, and then I then try to promote best practices. Asking some of my clients, those who advise, say, look, if you have a CCTV footages, please be very careful because it can lead to...
What are they supposed to do? I mean, what's best practice? Say you're walking into a mall and they tell you this building is under CCTV surveillance. What should they do with that data?
Ideally, first of all, you asked them the question, they should have a CCTV notice at the point of collection.
Okay.
The moment you walk in.
And the notice is just that thing saying this building is under 24-hour CCTV surveillance, or is there more?
No, there are more. And then where can you get information how that CCTV footage is being processed?
Okay. So they
So
should
there has
add
to be a
that.
privacy notice on there.
Okay.
Okay, or at least a link to it, or at least make you reasonably provide you with that at your request.
Okay.
We flipped that question. Remember, it is not your obligation to ask; it is their obligation to provide
you.
you. Right. So then the next step is what is the purpose? So you must have a specific purpose for the CCTV. Is it for security? Is it for the car registration numbers? What is it for? Right. And then what is the lawful basis? As I said, if they do not have a lawful basis, and there are 8 under the Kenya Data Protection Law, they cannot process. And then how long are they going to retain it for? If they say you're going to retain it for months and years, that is excessive. So these are just some of the basic questions you need to ask them. Let me know the purpose. Where are you keeping it? Where are you storing it?
But they're supposed to let us know.
Correct.
There should be somewhere, as you're walking around the mall,
Correct.
maybe they have a QR code that says scan here, so that you can get into knowing what we are doing
At
with
the
your
point
data.
of collection.
At the point of collection.
Correct.
If it's the parking companies, you drive in and it already knows your car registration, and the next time you go in, it already recognizes
You're
you're back.
Correct.
You're parked at this particular place. They should also tell you.
Yeah.
It's a lot. Many questions people are asking. How do I protect the data that I've given to a mobile operator from that information going to KRA and to others?
Well, that's, I'll not go into specifics, but then if you have given data to any organization, they also have a lawful basis of legal obligation, right? So, for example, if you're giving your data to your employer, for example, your KRA PIN number, they share it with KRA, they have a lawful basis of a legal obligation to whom they are supposed to share it with, okay? If you are giving if let's also talk about CCTV footage. If you have a CCTV footage and there is a criminal offense which has occurred, within the compound of the standard group, then an enforcement comes and says, okay, I need the CCTV footage. You are under legal obligation to give that data. And that applies to all organizations, right?
Okay.
Who have illegal obligation. So again, let's flip the question is, how do you know your data is safe? You should go and ask a telecommunication company, how do I know my data is safe? And they are obliged to provide you with all this information by law. Yeah.
What if they do?
There was a story the other day we read in the paper. Somebody went to court and said, my neighbor has been filming me using their CCTV. They're calling it their security. But the security camera is basically directed
Into my compound.
They are spying on me. Okay, of course, these things happen. Every neighborhood does. There's a guy who will put CCTVs all around.
Yes.
What should that person do?
Well, this has been there's been a very interesting case in the UK where one of these the person was using domestic CCTV cameras, and they were putting cameras faced on the driveway, on the garden, on wherever,
backyard,
everywhere, and it was just going everywhere. And then the neighbor said, "You are, this is intrusive. Can you be very careful? Can you remove or can you, somehow adjust the CCTV cameras?" He refused. He was sued. And he was the person who sued, the litigant, was awarded almost like, I think, if I'm not wrong, about £500,000 or something like that in damages. It's a huge amount, right? So the long and the short is, whenever you're processing CCTV footages, make sure it is reasonable and proportionate. Right? It all depends on how you're using it. I mean, if you use a small CCTV camera in Spice FM's compound, it's not reasonable proportion because it's not going to serve your purpose. You will need more than one.
Yeah.
But if you're in a small house or a small apartment, one is sufficient. Why do you need to put 5? You need to...
All around the house.
Exactly. So you need to look at things that way.
Okay. Amit, thank you very much for joining us. You should come again soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Come, let's talk practicals. I'm sure you have very many practical cases of things and encounters that you've had with data breaches, and people just not being aware of their obligations on how to collect and process data. Asante. Amit Gadhia is a data protection lawyer. He's a data protection officer. That means you've been given that thing by the ODPC.
Yeah, well, yes, ODPC, you have to register as a data controller and a data processor. But then there is no one particular course or certification as we have for lawyers or accountants, surveyors, doctors. I'm sure in the future we are going to come up with certifications
something like that,
which are locally based.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to apply to be one as well.
Oh, wow.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.